I was sitting in a hard plastic chair that smelled like disinfectant and old fear when my phone rang. You know that kind of waiting room. Fluorescent lights buzzing like they're annoyed to be alive. A daytime TV murmuring to nobody. People coughing into their hands like it's a group activity. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But I did. And that decision cracked my life clean in half. "Mom," my daughter said. Not, "Hey," not, "Are you okay?" Just, "Mom." Flat. Cold. Like she was ordering coffee. "We're leaving for Europe tomorrow. I sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money. Bye." And then the line went dead. No explanation, no hesitation, no guilt. Just a click. 45 years of motherhood reduced to a voicemail-length goodbye. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the phone in my hand, watching my reflection in the black screen, thinking, so this is how it ends. Not with a fight, not with tears, with paperwork and a plane ticket. If you've ever had someone you loved erase you like you were an inconvenience, you already know that pain doesn't arrive loud. It arrives quiet, heavy, like something sitting on your chest that you can't push off. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. If you were in my place, would you forgive? Or would you finally stop being nice? If stories like this hit close to home, make sure you like this video and subscribe. These aren't fairy tales. These are the kinds of truths people don't talk about. And if you've ever been betrayed by family, you're not alone here. My name is Antonia Brooks. I'm 71 years old. And until that phone call, I thought I knew my daughter. 6 months earlier, I had become a widow. My husband, Robert, died at our kitchen table, just like that. 1 minute he was buttering toast, the next minute he was gone. 45 years of marriage ended between a coffee cup and a plate with crumbs still on it. That morning had been ordinary. Painfully ordinary. He poured my coffee the way he always did, just enough cream, no sugar. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and said, "Good morning, my love." Those were the last words I ever heard from him. After that, life turned into a blur of condolences and casseroles, people telling me how strong I was while I felt hollow. Nights where the house felt too big and too quiet. Mornings where I still reached for the other side of the bed. That's when Angela, my only child, suddenly became very involved. She visited 3 times a week, helped with the funeral, drove me to the grocery store, sat beside me at church holding my hand when the hymns made me cry. She even insisted I see a doctor. "Mom, you have to take care of yourself now," she said, smiling. "You're alone." I thought that smile meant love. Now I know it meant opportunity. The beach house she sold had been our sanctuary. Robert and I bought it when Angela was 15. It took years of saving, skipping vacations, saying no to luxuries. But every summer, it was ours. Salt air, bare feet, family dinners that lasted too long. Angela running down the sand with scraped knees and sunburned shoulders. She brought boyfriends there. Later, she brought Edward, the man she married. I cooked, I cleaned, I did laundry for everyone. Because that's what mothers do. We build memories while everyone else just shows up. And the car. God, the car. Robert's old Ford pickup. He treated that thing like a living creature, washed it every Sunday, changed the oil on schedule like it was a religion, parked it under the same tree every single time. It still smelled like him, his aftershave, his leather gloves. That truck was the last piece of my husband still breathing in my life. And my daughter sold it like it was a used toaster. After the call, I stayed seated in that waiting room. The doctor's office called my name twice before I stood up. I didn't cry, not then. Something else happened instead. I felt calm. A strange, unsettling calm, the kind that only comes when something inside you snaps cleanly instead of shattering. Because in that moment, I remembered something. 3 days before Robert died, he handed me a manila envelope. He was standing in the bedroom, holding it like it weighed more than paper. He said, "Put this in your dresser drawer. If anything happens to me, open it later, not right away, only when you're ready." I didn't ask questions. That was Robert. Always prepared, always quiet about it. After the funeral, I forgot about it completely. Grief does that. It erases things. But now, sitting in that green plastic chair with my daughter's betrayal still echoing in my ears, I remembered.
The doctor told me I was healthy for my age. Said I needed more rest, better meals. I nodded politely. He had no idea my world had just been sold off while I waited for my blood pressure to be checked. I walked to the bus stop. According to Angela, I didn't own a car anymore. The city moved around me like nothing had happened. People laughing, arguing, rushing somewhere important. Everyone carrying secrets. So was I. When I got home, I went straight to the bedroom, opened the dresser drawer, and there it was, the envelope, exactly where I had left it. Robert's handwriting was on the front, neat, familiar, steady. I sat on the bed we had shared for nearly half a century and held it in my hands. I could feel papers inside, more than one. My fingers shook, just a little. I opened it, and everything changed. Inside were documents, legal ones, deeds, bank statements, certificates, and a letter written in Robert's careful script. "My dear Antonia," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you. Forgive me for keeping this from you, but I wanted to protect you." My breath caught. He wrote about investments, properties, savings he had quietly grown over decades. He wasn't just a bus driver. He was a planner, a strategist. "We don't just own the beach house," he wrote. "We own 6 other properties, including the apartment building where Angela and Edward live." I had to stop reading. My hands were trembling too much. The apartment building, the one my daughter lived in, the one she thought was hers. Robert went on. Shares in companies, bank accounts I never knew existed, numbers that didn't feel real. "You are rich, my love," he wrote. "You always were. Now you just know it." I sat there in the dark, surrounded by shadows that no longer scared me, and laughed. A quiet laugh, the kind that comes when the universe finally tips its hand. Angela thought she had left me with nothing. She had no idea what I was holding. That night, my phone rang again. It was my daughter. Her voice was softer now, sweet, calculated. "Mom, I just wanted to check on you. We transferred your share from the sale. It's not much, but it should help you get by for a few months." "My share?" I asked calmly. 30%, she said. "That's fair, right? We needed the rest for our investment in Europe." 30% of my own life. I thanked her, told her to have a safe trip, told her I loved her. And when she hung up, I smiled, because this story wasn't about money anymore. It was about something much bigger. And this was only the beginning. That night, after Angela hung up on me for the second time, I didn't cry myself to sleep like a broken woman. I didn't stare at the ceiling asking God why my own child could do this to me. I slept better than I had in months, because for the first time since Robert died, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't lost. I was awake. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house felt different. Not empty, not heavy, just quiet in a way that felt intentional, like it was waiting for instructions. I made coffee the way Robert used to, poured it into his favorite mug, and sat at the kitchen table with the envelope spread out in front of me like a map. This wasn't just money. This was leverage. Angela thought she had taken everything,
The house, the truck, my independence. What she didn't realize was that she had only taken what she could see. And that blind spot was about to cost her more than she imagined. If you're still watching, stay with me. This is where the power shifts. And if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit like and subscribe now. You'll want to see how this plays out. The letter explained everything. Robert had spent decades investing quietly. Nothing flashy, nothing risky, small properties in neighborhoods before they were popular, shares in companies before they were worth talking about. He had trusted time more than luck, and he had trusted me enough to leave it all in my hands. I read the line again about the apartment building, the one where Angela and Edward lived, the one they thought was theirs. Robert had owned it through a company he created years ago, a company that now, according to every document in front of me, belonged entirely to me. I wasn't just a grieving widow, I was my daughter's landlord. The phone rang mid-morning, Angela again. This time she sounded rushed, distracted, already mentally checked out of my life. "Mom, just reminding you we leave this afternoon. Edward's already at the airport." "Of course," I said. "I hope it all works out." "It will," she replied confidently. "This opportunity is huge." Huge. That word echoed in my head long after she hung up. I stood at the window and watched them load their suitcases into a cab. Expensive luggage, designer carry-on, big dreams funded by stolen memories. They didn't look up, didn't wave, didn't say goodbye. When the cab pulled away, something inside me settled. Not anger, not revenge, resolve. I called Mr. Peterson that afternoon, Robert's lawyer, the man who had quietly handled his affairs for years. "Mrs. Brooks," he said warmly, "how are you holding up?" "I found Ming envelope," I replied. There was a pause on the line. Not surprise. Recognition. "I was wondering when you would," he said. I told him everything, the phone call, the sale, the lies. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sighed. "The sale of the beach house was illegal. Your daughter had no authority to sell it." I closed my eyes. "Can it be reversed?" "Yes," he said. "Immediately." "And the apartment building?" "You've always owned it. We just need to formalize your control." I smiled. "No lawsuits. Not yet." There was silence. "You want this handled quietly," he finally said. "Yes," I replied. "I want everything put back where it belongs, but I don't want Angela to know." Mr. Peterson didn't ask why. Smart men rarely do. The following weeks were surreal. To the outside world, I was a poor widow abandoned by my only child. Neighbors offered casseroles. Strangers gave sympathetic looks. Aurora, my neighbor of 40 years, stopped me one afternoon while I was watering plants. "Antonia, is it true Angela left you alone?" she asked gently. "Yes," I replied. "She needed to live her life." "And you? How will you manage?" "I always do," I said with a smile. Inside, I was orchestrating a quiet restoration of my entire life. The beach house sale was nullified. The buyers were refunded. They never even knew my name. The property came back to me like it had never left. The apartment building paperwork was finalized 2 weeks later. Angela and Edward were officially tenants. They just didn't know it yet. Then came the truck. Robert's truck had been sold legally, thanks to a power of attorney Angela had tricked me into signing months earlier. I barely remembered it. Grief makes you careless. But luck has a sense of humor. The buyer turned out to be an acquaintance of Mr. Peterson's. When he heard the full story, he agreed to return it for a modest compensation. When I sat behind the wheel again, inhaling that familiar scent, I felt something I hadn't felt since Robert died. Home. That night, Mr. Peterson called again. "There's something else you should know," he said. Edward was in debt. A lot of it. Loans stacked on loans, some taken out using the apartment as collateral. The apartment he didn't own. If the banks discovered that, everything would collapse. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. 3 days later, Aurora came rushing over, breathless. "Antonia," she whispered, like the walls might be listening, Edward's in trouble. Banks, investigations. Angela's coming back from Europe. I nodded calmly. The universe had perfect timing. Angela arrived alone. No Edward, no luggage full of confidence, just one suitcase and a face that looked 10 years older. She received the eviction notice the next morning. 30 days. She called me immediately. "Mom," she said, panic cracking her voice, "I don't understand. They're saying we have to leave the apartment." "That's terrible," I replied gently. "Are you sure it's real?" "Yes," she said. "The company owns the building, some Robert Investments." I almost laughed. "Come over," I said. "We'll talk." When she arrived, she looked small, fragile, like a child who finally realized the world doesn't bend just because you expect it to. She cried, she apologized, she told me Edward had abandoned her, that there was no business, that there were debts she didn't even know about. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. I opened my arms. "Stay here," I said. "You're my daughter." And just like that, she moved back into the house she thought she had taken from me forever. But here's the thing. This wasn't forgiveness. This was education, and the lesson had only just begun. Angela started working nights, cleaning offices, counting pennies, learning what it felt like to earn survival instead of assuming it. Every night she came home exhausted, humbled, changed. She thought I was struggling too. She had no idea I was paying lawyers, reclaiming assets, and planning her future behind the scenes. Then came the second envelope, the safety deposit box. Jewels, family heirlooms, enough money to save her from drowning. She wanted to sell them immediately to pay Edward's debts. That was when I knew she still hadn't learned. I let her sell them anyway. Sometimes the lesson only sticks when it hurts. Weeks passed. Angela broke down, apologized, reflected, worked harder, and finally, one morning, Mr. Peterson called again. "We can clear her from all the debts," he said. "Fraud, forgery, Edward will face charges." I scheduled the meeting. It was time for the truth, because the difference between punishment and justice is purpose, and my purpose was never to destroy my daughter. It was to rebuild her, but not before she understood exactly what she had almost lost. The morning of the meeting arrived quieter than I expected. No dramatic music, no storm outside, just sunlight creeping through the curtains like nothing important was about to happen. Angela sat at the kitchen table, stirring cold coffee she wasn't drinking, her hands trembling just enough to notice if you were looking closely. She thought we were going to beg a lawyer for mercy. She had no idea she was about to meet the architect of her entire collapse. "Mom," she said softly, "if this lawyer can't help me, I don't know what I'm going to do." I touched her hand. "Let's just listen first." The drive downtown was silent. Angela stared out the window the way people do when they're replaying every mistake they've ever made. I watched her reflection in the glass. The entitlement was gone. The confidence was gone. What remained was something raw and honest. Fear. And if you've ever watched someone you love finally face the consequences of their choices, you know that fear can either break them or rebuild them. Mr. Peterson's office looked exactly the same as it always had. Marble floors, tall windows, the kind of quiet that makes you feel smaller the moment you walk in. Angela clutched her folder of debt notices like it was armor. "Mrs. Brooks? Miss Brooks," Mr. Peterson said warmly. "Thank you for coming." Angela immediately stood straighter. "Sir, I should tell you up front, I don't have money for legal fees." "That won't be an issue today," he replied, glancing at me. Her eyebrows knitted together. Confusion flickered across her face. He handed her the first folder. "These documents show that your husband forged your signature," he said calmly. "There's sufficient evidence of fraud. You are not legally responsible for his debts." Angela stared at the pages. I don't understand, she whispered. How did you find all this? Mr. Peterson didn't answer. He slid the second folder across the desk. This, he said, belongs to your mother. Angela opened it. The color drained from her face. Property deeds, bank statements, investment summaries, company ownership papers. She flipped page after page, faster now, breath shallow. This can't be right, she said. This says you own the building I lived in. Yes, I replied. And the beach house, she continued, and other properties and accounts. Yes. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. You knew, she said slowly. You knew all of this when I came crying to you? You knew when I was scrubbing office floors at night? Yes. The silence stretched. Why didn't you help me? She finally asked. There it was, the question everyone asks when consequences finally land. Why didn't you help me? I leaned forward. Because if I had saved you immediately, I said, you would have learned nothing. Her eyes filled with tears. You let me suffer. No, I corrected gently. I let you learn. Angela shook her head. I lost everything. No, I said, you lost the illusion that everything would always be handed to you. She sobbed then. Real sobs, the kind that come from deep understanding, not self-pity. I abandoned you, she whispered. I sold your life like it meant nothing. Yes, I said softly. You did. Mr. Peterson spoke quietly. Your mother paid all legal expenses. Your debts are cleared. You're free. Angela looked up sharply. You paid for this? She asked me. I paid for your future, not your comfort. She wiped her face. I don't deserve this, she said. That's the first honest thing you've said in months, I replied. We left the office without another word. At home that night, Angela sat at the table long after dinner went cold. Mom, she said finally, do you hate me? I considered the question carefully. No, I said, but I stopped excusing you. That was when she truly broke, and that was also when she began to change. Angela kept her cleaning job. She didn't have to. She chose to. I need to finish what I started, she said. I need to know I can survive without shortcuts. She started saving money, paying bills responsibly, apologizing without being prompted. One night, she came home exhausted and sat beside me on the couch. You know what scares me the most? She said. What? That I could have lived my whole life never realizing how selfish I was. I nodded. Most people do. Weeks passed. Edward was arrested in France. Fraud, forgery, fake marriage. The man who had convinced Angela she deserved everything without effort now sat in a cell with nothing. She didn't cry when she found out. I feel empty, she said, like that version of me died. Good, I replied. She needed to. 6 months later, Angela enrolled in school, social work. I want to help women who hit rock bottom like I did, she said. Women who don't have a mother watching quietly from the shadows. The beach house became a shelter. The apartment building funded it. And my daughter became someone I was proud to stand beside. One evening, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Angela turned to me. Mom, she said, you didn't save me with money. No, I said. You saved me with truth. I smiled. That's the only thing that lasts. And somewhere in the quiet, I swear I felt Robert smiling too. People think the story ends when the lesson is learned. They imagine a clean wrap-up, a hug, a sunset, credits rolling. But real life doesn't work like that. Real change is quieter, slower, and a lot more uncomfortable than anyone wants to admit. Angela didn't wake up one morning magically transformed into a better person. She woke up sore, tired, nervous, still ashamed. Growth doesn't erase guilt. It forces you to live with it without running. And that's exactly what she did. She kept her head down, took the bus, wore the same shoes until the soles thinned. She stopped asking me for help before she'd tried helping herself. That was new. That mattered. But here's the thing no one tells you. When someone finally starts changing for real, the world around them often pushes back. Hard. It started with whispers. Neighbors who once smiled politely now leaned in with curiosity sharpened by judgment. They knew Angela had left me. They knew she'd come back broke. People love redemption stories, but only when they're distant. Up close, they prefer gossip. One afternoon, I heard raised voices outside. Angela stood on a porch facing Aurora and two other women from the block. Their smiles were tight, their eyes curious in that invasive way people get when they think they're entitled to answers. "So it's true," one of them said. "You sold your mother's house and ran off to Europe?" Angela swallowed. "Yes." "And now you're back?" Aurora asked, gently, but even she was watching closely. Angela nodded. "Yes." Silence. "Well," the other woman said, "some people would call that heartless." Angela didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply said, "They'd be right," and walked back inside. That night, she sat across from me at the table, eyes red but steady. "I deserved that," she said. I studied her for a moment. "No," I replied. "You deserve consequences, not cruelty." She nodded slowly, like she was filing that sentence away for later. If you're still watching, this part matters, because this is where most people relapse, when shame gets loud again, when the past won't stay buried. Stay with me. Angela's classes started the following week. She struggled, not because she wasn't smart, but because she was learning how to listen instead of dominate a conversation. She was learning empathy instead of entitlement. That's harder than any exam. One night, she came home shaken. "We talked about abuse today," she said quietly, "about how people manipulate trust." She paused. "I sound like every case study." I reached for her hand. "Awareness is painful," I said. "That's how you know it's working." The shelter project expanded faster than we expected. Women arrived with children, bruises hidden under makeup, fear stitched into their posture. Angela worked there part-time, unpaid. At first, she stayed quiet, observed, listened. Then one evening, I watched her sit beside a woman who reminded me too much of myself decades ago. Same tired eyes, same habit of apologizing for existing. Angela didn't lecture. She didn't fix. She just said, "I know what it feels like to realize too late that you trusted the wrong person." The woman broke down. Angela held her hand. I turned away, not because I was proud, but because I was overwhelmed. That night, I found Robert's letter again, reread it for the 100th time. "You always see people clearly," he had written about me, "even when they can't see themselves." He had been right, and now, finally, so was our daughter. But life wasn't finished testing her. Edward reached out from jail. A letter, handwritten, manipulative even on paper. He apologized, blamed stress, claimed love, promised change. Angela read it twice, then handed it to me. "What do you think?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. "What do you feel?" I asked instead. She took a deep breath. "I feel nothing," she said, "and that scares me." I smiled gently. "That's peace, not emptiness." She tore the letter up slowly, methodically, dropped the pieces into the trash like closing a door without slamming it. That was the moment I knew she was free. Months passed. Angela graduated at the top of her class. The shelter received state funding, grants, recognition. One afternoon, she came home glowing. "They want me to run it," she said breathlessly. "Full time." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you ready?" She hesitated. "I don't know." "Good," I replied. That means you'll take it seriously." She did. And she did it well. The same woman who once sold her mother's life for convenience now fought daily for women who had nothing. Not because it made her feel good, but because she remembered exactly how entitlement feels before it collapses. One evening, as we locked up the shelter together, Angela stopped and looked at me. "Mom," she said, "why didn't you just cut me off forever?" I considered that question longer than she expected. "Because justice without mercy creates bitterness," I said. "And mercy without justice creates monsters." She nodded slowly. "I was becoming one," she whispered. "Yes," I said, "but you didn't stay one." The following spring, I transferred ownership of the apartment building into a trust. One day, it would be Angela's. Not yet, but one day. She didn't know that. She didn't need to. The lesson wasn't about inheritance. It was about humility. On my 72nd birthday, Angela surprised me. She handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "The beach house," she said softly. "I fixed it up, painted it, made it yours again, completely." My throat tightened. I didn't do it to make up for what I did. I did it because I finally understand what it meant. I hugged her, not because she had earned forgiveness, but because she had earned respect. And that, I learned, is far harder to lose. The beach house didn't look the same when I unlocked the door. Not because the paint was fresh, or the windows were clean, or the porch had been repaired. It felt different because the meaning had changed. This place had once been a reward for a lifetime of sacrifice. Then it became evidence of betrayal. Now it was something else entirely. A second chance. Angela stood behind me, hands folded, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to step inside. "I didn't keep anything," she said quietly. "I sold the furniture I bought, the new stuff. I wanted it to feel like yours again." I walked through each room slowly. The living room where Robert used to nap on Sunday afternoons, the kitchen where Angela once spilled orange juice and cried like it was the end of the world. Memory has weight, and I could feel it in every floorboard. "You did good," I said. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. If you're still watching, this part matters more than the betrayal ever did. Because this is where power, forgiveness, and boundaries finally settle into place. That night, we sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, listening to the waves. Angela stared out at the dark water. "I used to think love meant never being told no," she said. "Now I know that's how you raise someone weak." I nodded. "Love without limits isn't love, it's avoidance." She swallowed. "I was angry at you for a long time, even before Dad died." That caught my attention. "Why?" I asked. "Because you never needed me," she said. "You were always solid. Dad, too. I thought if I took control, if I proved I was smarter, stronger, I'd finally matter." I let that sink in. "You mattered long before you tried to take," I said. "But you confused attention with value." She wiped her eyes. "I know." The next morning, we met with Mr. Peterson one last time. He laid out the future calmly, professionally. Trust structures, long-term planning, protections. Everything designed not to trap Angela, but to ensure she never confused access with ownership again. Angela listened carefully. "I don't want control. Not yet." Mr. Peterson smiled slightly. "That's usually when someone is finally ready for it." We drove back in silence. At a stoplight, Angela spoke again. "Mom," she said, "what if I mess up again?" I looked straight ahead. "Then you'll face it again," I replied. "But you won't run. That's the difference." Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were arguments, setbacks, days when Angela came home frustrated, questioning herself, wondering if she'd really changed or just learned to behave better. Change isn't dramatic, it's repetitive, boring, humbling, and that's why it lasts. One afternoon, a woman from the shelter showed up at the beach house with her daughter. They had nowhere to go. Angela didn't look at me before offering them the guest room. That told me everything. Later that night, I watched Angela teaching the little girl how to shell peanuts on the porch steps. Patient, gentle, present. The same hands that once signed away my life without hesitation now trembled when holding someone else's trust. Growth doesn't erase the past. It rewires the future. Months later, Angela was invited to speak at a conference. Survivors, social workers, judges, people who believed systems mattered. She stood at the podium, nervous but steady. "I used to think power was about taking," she said. "I learned the hard way that it's about responsibility, and that the people who love you enough to say no are the ones who save you." The room was silent. I didn't clap right away. I cried. That night, Angela hugged me longer than usual. "I don't need forgiveness anymore. I just want to be worthy of it." I kissed her forehead. "That's how I know you are." The ocean roared softly behind us. Somewhere in that sound, I heard Robert again, not in words, in approval. And for the first time, I knew the story wasn't about betrayal at all. It was about inheritance. Not of money, but of character. People assume the hardest part of rebuilding a life happens right after betrayal. They're wrong. The hardest part comes later, when everyone else finds out. Word doesn't travel fast when you're invisible. It explodes when money, property, and shame are involved. And once Angela started running the shelter successfully, once donors and officials began using her name with respect, the past she tried to bury came clawing back up through other people's mouths. It started with a phone call from my sister-in-law, Denise. I hadn't heard her voice in years. "Antonia," she said, stretching my name thin, "I hear you've been busy." Busy, that was her word for it. "Yes," I replied. "Life continues." She laughed lightly. "I heard Angela took advantage of you, sold things that weren't hers. That must have been devastating." I waited. "But then I heard," she continued, "you somehow bounced back. Properties, money, quite a surprise." There it was. Not concern. Inventory. "I didn't bounce back," I said. "I was always standing." Denise cleared her throat. "Well, family is family. We should talk." We hung up politely. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone. That call was the first crack. The second came from a cousin I barely remembered, then an old friend of Robert's, then a church acquaintance who suddenly wanted coffee. Everyone had the same curiosity dressed up as care. Angela noticed. "They're circling," she said one night, "like they smell something." They do. They smell access. If you're still watching, pay attention here. This is where many redemption stories collapse, not because of greed, because of pressure. The shelter received a large donation offer the following month, 6 figures, life-changing money. There was one condition, a board seat. Angela brought the paperwork home, excitement and unease fighting on her face. "This could expand everything," she said. "More beds, more counselors, real reach." I read the donor's name. Denise, my sister-in-law. I didn't react immediately. "What do you think?" Angela asked carefully. "I think help with conditions isn't help, it's ownership." Angela nodded slowly. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." She didn't accept the donation. The next week, Denise showed up at the shelter unannounced. Perfect hair, perfect smile, eyes scanning the space like she was already rearranging furniture in her head. "I just wanted to see what my niece has built," she said loudly. Angela shook her hand politely. Denise turned to me. "Antonia, darling, you look well, comfortable." I am, I replied. She leaned closer. You know, Robert would have wanted family taken care of. I met her gaze. Robert wanted character taken seriously. Her smile tightened. That night, Angela cried. I hate that this still affects me, she said. I feel like I'm being judged forever. I sat beside her. You're not being judged. You're being remembered. Those aren't the same thing. She wiped her eyes. Does it ever go away? No, but it gets quieter if you stay honest. The pressure didn't stop. Edward's family reached out next. Letters, emails, even a visit attempt. They blamed Angela for his arrest, claimed she manipulated him, demanded financial help. Angela read the messages with shaking hands. I ruined his life, she whispered. No, I said firmly. He ruined his own. You just stopped carrying him. But doubt is stubborn. One evening, Angela sat at the kitchen table long after I'd gone to bed. I found her there hours later, staring at her laptop. What are you doing? I asked. She flinched. I was thinking, she said slowly, maybe I should help them, just a little, to make peace. There it was, the final temptation. The old Angela would have written the check already. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Who would that help? I asked. She hesitated. Them, she said. And who would it hurt? She looked up at me. Me, she whispered. And the women at the shelter? I asked. She closed her eyes. I'd be teaching them the wrong lesson. Yes, I said, that guilt should be paid off instead of understood. Angela shut the laptop. I don't want to be that person anymore, she said. The next morning, she blocked every number. That decision cost her sleep for weeks, but it gave her something better. Peace without permission. The final test came quietly. A developer approached us about the apartment building, a massive offer, enough money to fund the shelter forever and then some. Angela brought it to me, hands steady but eyes searching. We could sell. This could secure everything. I read the proposal carefully. What do you think? She asked. I handed it back. It isn't my decision. It's yours. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, if I sell it now, I'll always wonder if I did it for the right reasons. She declined the offer. Not because it wasn't smart, because she wasn't ready. That was the moment I knew the lesson had stuck. Not when she said the right words, when she made the harder choice without being watched. Months later, at a shelter fundraiser, Angela took the stage. She told her story, not the version that made her look noble, the real one, the ugly one, the selfish one. I thought love meant entitlement, she said. I learned it means accountability. The room stood, not for the shelter, for the truth. That night, as we drove home, Angela reached for my hand. I don't need to be forgiven anymore, she said. I just need to keep showing up right. I squeezed her hand. That's how legacies are built, I said. And as the headlights cut through the dark road ahead, I knew the final chapter was ready to be written. Not about money, not about betrayal, but about what remains when power is finally used correctly. The truth about legacies is that they don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with applause or headlines or a sense of final victory. They show up quietly, in moments most people overlook, when no one is watching and no one is clapping. The morning I turned 73, I woke up before the sun and sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was silent except for the ticking clock Robert had refused to replace for 40 years. I ran my fingers along the wood grain, memorizing a moment I knew wouldn't last forever. Angela was asleep upstairs. That mattered. Not because she depended on me, but because she trusted the space enough to rest. I made coffee and opened the final folder Mr. Peterson had prepared months earlier. I had delayed it on purpose. Some decisions deserve patience. Inside was the completed trust. Everything Robert and I had built. The properties, the accounts, the shelter, the future. And the conditions. Angela would inherit it all eventually, but not as an owner first, as a steward. The trust required her continued work at the shelter, financial transparency, and most importantly, accountability to a board that could remove her if she ever confused service with entitlement again. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. For her, and for everything she touched. When Angela came downstairs, hair messy and eyes half closed, she smiled. "Happy birthday, Mom." I slid the folder across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Your inheritance," I replied. She froze. "I don't want it if it means control," she said immediately. "I don't want to become who I was." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Then you won't," I said, "because it doesn't belong to you yet." She read slowly, carefully. Her eyes moved over every condition, every safeguard, every line Robert and I had written together across time. When she finished, she looked up, tears sitting but not falling. "You don't trust me," she said quietly. "I trust who you are becoming," I replied. "I don't trust who you might become if you stop being watched." She nodded. "Thank you," she said. That was the moment I knew I had succeeded as a mother in a way I never had before. Not by protecting her from consequences, but by protecting her from power too soon. Life continued. The shelter grew, women left stronger than they arrived, children laughed more freely. Angela became known not as a survivor, but as someone who built survivors. One afternoon, a young woman asked her during a group session, "How did you forgive yourself?" Angela paused. I stopped trying to erase what I did. I focused on who I could be next. I watched from the doorway, unseen, and I felt peace. The beach house hosted its final summer. Laughter returned to the porch, kids running barefoot again, Angela cooking meals that tasted a little burned but full of effort. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Angela sat beside me. "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" she asked. I thought about that. "If they had," I said, "you wouldn't be who you are now, and I wouldn't know what you're capable of." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you didn't give up on me," she said. "I never did. I just stopped rescuing you." A year later, my health began to slow me down. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet reminders that time always collects its dues. Angela noticed. She drove me to appointments, cooked more carefully, sat with me longer. Not out of obligation, out of love. One night, as she tucked a blanket around my shoulders, she whispered, "I won't waste what you gave me." I smiled. "I know." When the time finally came, it wasn't scary. I closed my eyes, knowing everything important had been handled. Not the money, the meaning. Angela stood strong at my memorial. She told the truth about her mistakes, about my patience, about how love doesn't always look kind in the moment, but it always looks clear in the end. And when she unlocked the trust fully years later, she didn't celebrate. She got to work. Because that was the legacy. Not wealth. Wisdom. If this story moved you, if it made you think about family, boundaries, or the kind of legacy you're building, take a second to like this video. It helps stories like this reach people who need them. And if you want more real, powerful stories about truth, consequences, and redemption, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Some lessons come late, but they last forever.